Good afternoon and hello, everybody, and welcome into Senior Living Live. My name is Melissa. Thank you so much, as always, for being with us, taking the time to be a part of this webinar today. We will be discussing ways to cope with an aging parent. No matter where your parent falls on the spectrum of aging, from perhaps needing no assistance to needing quite a bit of help and care, we have options for the different challenges that you and your aging loved one may be facing. Melora Jackson is an expert on this topic. You see her there. She will share her knowledge with all of us here today, and she will, of course, be available to answer all of your questions at the end of her presentation. In order to be a part of the conversation, which we encourage all of you to do, you can just type your questions there at the bottom of the screen using the Q&A option. Type the questions out there at any point in time during the presentation, and I'll be happy to read those to Melora at the end of her presentation. And just so that you know, you can remain anonymous. Melora, it's great to have you back on the program. The webinar is all yours.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I just love talking to people from Arbor. It's always a pleasure. So let me just share my screen and we'll get started here. Okay, so coping with an aging parent is something that a lot of us, in fact, most of us are going to face at some point in our lives. So we want to make sure that we have all of the information and tools available to make the best choices for our loved ones and for ourselves, of course. So let me start real quickly with just telling you a little bit about who I am, just a tiny bit of reference. So I work with Second Wind Dreams. I'm the Director of Clinical Services at Second Wind Dreams. And Second Wind Dreams is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to change the perception of aging, in other words, to fight ageism and help people in all our communities see that everybody has wishes and dreams and hopes to the very end of their lives, and we're all viable adults, which is very important to remember. And we do this by fulfilling dreams of elders who live in long-term care communities. And we also do a lot of dementia care training, and that's where I come in, doing a lot of the virtual dementia tours, our flagship program, in which it's a simulation of what it's like to have dementia. So our goal is to create empathy and understanding so we can do a better job of care. We also have a variety of other programs in terms of training and education as well. So that's the commercial of who I am. So let's dive into our topic. So the first thing I want to do is go over the things that I said I would talk about today. So our key learning. So first, I want to talk a little bit about what those sort of changes are as we age that we will all experience, and that some of those changes are more profound for others than for some, and how they can impact their person's ability to take care of themselves. Some people don't need any support. Some people do real well, but most of us are going to need some help at some point in our lives. And then I want to talk a bit about the challenges and rewards of caring for a parent or another older adult, and also some strategies for how to take care of ourselves, because that's a real important piece, whether we're doing direct caregiving or even if we're just long distance helping with arrangements or whatever. And lastly, I want to share a few of just kind of explain those different options for senior living, and some of the resources that might be available to you, and where to go from there. So that said, let's talk about aging. So first of all, aging begins from the moment we are born. We begin to age. We grow and we start to age at the same time. And how we age is influenced by genetics, lifestyle choices, psychological issues, social issues, spiritual issues, and so on. There's so many different factors. So no two people age exactly at the same rate or in the same way. There's a lot of similarities, but it does definitely vary from person to person. And now we often hear that term silver tsunami, which we are now in, but the fastest growing population of the US is people who are 85 and older, and the second fastest is those who are 100 and older, because we're getting better at living longer. We're doing so much to stop diseases and manage different conditions that people are able to live longer, and those who usually are centenarians or better tend to do very well and tend to have pretty good health to have made it that far. So it's very encouraging for all of us that more of us are living much longer, and most of us are living better, more healthy than before, but not always. And so that's when we want to make sure that we have the proper supports for people so that they can live their best life at any age. So that said, there's some physical changes that occur as we age to all of us, and to what degree they become issues depends on the individual. So these aren't necessarily in any order. That's why I put them in a circle because they can all happen at different rates for different people. But there's some vision issues. There are hearing issues. There's really issues that involve all of our senses: the taste, smell, touch, and there's some core body issues as well. So I'm just going to briefly kind of go over those pieces of physical changes to aging first. So the first one I'm going to talk about here is our core body changes. These are things we don't typically think about, but that are real important when it comes to how we support people who are older. So first of all, we definitely have changes to our skin and skin integrity, but also to our core body temperature. You may have noticed, if you're not familiar with senior living kinds of environments, that when you walk into one, they're pretty warm. And that's because people, older adults, tend to get colder easier. But an important point here too is they can also get overheated easier. It's harder to regulate temperature changing as quickly as it is when we're younger. So extreme changes are more difficult for older bodies to deal with. And hydration is a very, very important piece of making sure a person is able to manage going from one temperature range to another. So just wanted to make sure we're all in understanding that piece, because that comes in to be a very critical piece when it comes to care. As far as touch, again, skin integrity, the skin tends to thin. And if a person has spent a lot of time in the sun, their skin is going to be at even higher risk. It's going to be thinner and more fragile. And so as we age, and we're talking now about people who are quite elderly, not people who are in their 60s probably, but people who, unless they've had a lot of skin, or excuse me, sun exposure over their lifetime. But skin tears and bleeding more easily are common. And you can see in this little picture the bruising and such. It doesn't take but just a simple pressure. If somebody squeezed your arm like that, just not horribly tight, but tight enough, then that can be the result. A lot of that under the skin contusions and such. There's also a loss of sensation, a little bit of tactile issue there, as not being able to sense the temperature changes as quickly. Heat, cold, pain, pressure, bruising, all those kinds of things. The sensations, certainly they still feel them. People still feel them, but they become a little bit more harder for the brain to process as quickly, even if a person has no cognitive issues. And so a person may become more hypersensitive to pain. They may, things may be more painful than they used to be, or they may have a hyposensitivity, which means they're less sensitive. Now, so the aging eye, and I'm sure all of you have experienced this, unless you're quite young, and you will, is a phenomenon called presbyopia, which is fun to say. But if you've ever noticed, if you're older, if you're 40 or older, you're probably dealing with this. If you're not, you will. That over time, you have to hold things further away. And that's, right around the age of 40 to between 40 and 50s is when a lot of people start using readers because they're having trouble with the long reading things that are up close. And that's regardless of any other kinds of eye conditions of myopia or whatever. So we tend to be a little bit more farsighted as we age. So you can see here what a menu would look like if you hold it up close. It's kind of blurry, so people hold it further along, further away. So this is a very common condition in the aging eye. Now there's some other things that happen to all of us as we age. We get a yellow film on our iris. So the world gets yellower and yellower the older we get. That's just something that's going to happen to every single one of us. We see less blue hues and blue hues and more yellow hues as we age. That's a fun one to say. And we need a lot more light as we age as well. So it takes about 3 times as much light for older eyes to see as younger eyes. And so we want to make sure that light environments are nice and bright, but not with glare. We want to avoid glare because we're more sensitive to glare as we age. and that we have more contrasting colors so that we can see beyond that yellow as well. Now, there's other eye conditions that are quite common. They certainly are not a part of aging, but tend to happen to a lot of people as they age. So these are worth mentioning. So cataracts, that's probably the most common one. Almost all of us will get cataracts if we live long enough. Some people will get them much younger than others, but most of us, not everybody, but most of us will get cataracts at some point. I'm beginning to deal with that myself, according to my eye doctor, even though I haven't noticed it yet. And that's kind of an opacity over the lens of your eye. So everything gets a little bit more blurry and a little bit more milky looking. And then over time, it makes it much harder to see. Now that's something that's easily fixed with some laser surgery, and a person can see just fine again. So that it has to get to a certain degree of difficulty with eyesight before there's an intervention, but it can be done, it can be fixed. Then there's macular degeneration, which, as you can see from the pictures there, you see the two yellow round, that's part of your eyeball, where there's different pieces that are affecting vision. So a person might see parts of things, but not see the whole picture in front of them. And then a person can have vision issues due to a stroke, or they can have retinal neuropathy, which often accompanies diabetes, but can be related to other conditions as well. And then glaucoma as well. So those are some of the most common eye conditions out there that often are associated with aging. There certainly are others, but those are the most common that one would run into. And some of these we can do some things about. We can do some therapies and different kinds of special glasses and things like that. But these are the kinds of things that can affect a person as they age. And where that's particularly important, not only for quality of life, is when it comes to safety issues. Of course, we think first of driving and things like that. So if a person is continuing to drive with one of these conditions and it's become severe, then we need to have that conversation about, is it time to either get the eyes fixed or reconsider whether we should be driving or not. Now, hearing, the ear has a couple of different functions. Of course, hearing, that's what we always think of, but also our balance, our vestibular sense is in our ears, and that keeps us balanced. It keeps us from falling over and such. But over time, as we age, the eardrum thickens. And so the bones in the middle ear are having a little more difficulty working because of that. And we're more sensitive to high-pitched noises. So after the age of 40, and I know 40 sounds so young with all of these things, but the process begins. That doesn't mean we're old at 40, certainly not. I don't think people are old until after the age of 80, and even then, depends on the person. But that's when this happens. So around the age of 40, that sensitivity to high-pitched sounds begins to become a problem. And about 30% of people over the age of 65 have some level of hearing impairment, usually about 30% impairment in hearing. Excuse me, not 30%, but have some hearing impairment. And it can grow over time. When you get to folks who are maybe perhaps 80, 85, that percentage is going to go up, of course, because that eardrum continues to get thicker and thicker. So even if you don't have any other issues that would affect your hearing, that can still be an issue for a lot of people. So again, that plus the balance can be a concern for safety as well. And then touch and smell, I'm combining these two because I don't want to dwell forever on these physical aging issues, but these are a couple of senses that tend to remain the longest. So smell particularly, people can smell things pretty much the same way they could when they were young. So smell is like the sense that has the least amount of change to it. So if something smells good to you, it probably smells good to the older person. If something stinks to you, it's going to stink to them too. So don't assume that, I've seen people walk into nursing homes and think, oh, well, they can't smell that honestly, that urine smell, but they can. So it's very important to make sure if you have a loved one that is going to be going to a senior living environment, you choose a place that can make sure that the scents are good and is well maintained. So, and usually with assisted living kinds of places, that's not an issue. It tends to be more a nursing home issue in older homes that have been around, where the buildings have been around a long time. Because we're getting much better now at managing those kinds of things. Um, and then taste, we tend to lose more of our taste, even though our smell is strong and the two are very well related. Taste buds don't do so well. They tend to not work as well. So we have only about 30% or 36% of our taste ability remaining by the time we hit 75. So it's helpful to put, makes foods a little bit spicier, a little bit more pepper, things like that. I remember one of the tricks that I learned early on in my career was if you've got somebody who's having who doesn't find maybe they have to drink Ensure to help supplement their diet. I remember one person we put a drop of Tabasco sauce in their strawberry Ensure, which sounds nasty, but when you don't have a lot of taste sense left, sometimes that can help. So experimenting with those kinds of things to make things stronger and appealing can be helpful to managing appetite as well. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the signs that a parent might need some extra supports from you because they're having difficulty with different things to take care of themselves. So first of all, of course, we think of forgetfulness. If a person's having memory issues, then of course, if that's gonna, oh, and I have a typo that, oh no, I don't have a typo, excuse me. I'm just reading ahead of myself here. If it poses a safety risk to a person, that's when we really want to intervene. If somebody is forgetting where they put their glasses here and there, or forgetting names now and then, that's not anything to be concerned about. We're all going to have some memory issues just simply because we've got more things to remember in life. But when forgetfulness becomes a problem, it interferes with daily activities, and a person is starting to get lost in familiar places, or has difficulty with remembering the rules of the road or things like that, then we need to definitely intervene, because that's definitely a sign that the person's got a memory issue that is significant, and we need to do something to make sure that they're safe. Of course, if medications are not being taken correctly, that is a big red flag. We want to make sure, and all of these, there's a whole lot of different underlying conditions. So this is not about diagnosing any particular thing. This isn't necessarily dementia or any other particular thing. It might be, but it's about these different signs that there's something wrong that needs to be fixed, or the way a person needs to be supported. So if there's an increase in messiness in their home, now if a person always kept their home messy, sometimes it's hard to tell, but sometimes it gets worse. You can tell if it's getting worse. So if that's an issue, that might be worth looking into as well. If there's decline in personal hygiene, of course, that's an issue. If their person is showing signs of confusion, and we know there's a lot of things that can cause confusion as well. So we definitely want to make sure that person is seen by their healthcare provider, because there's a lot of things that can clear up that confusion. It may not be a cognitive issue, maybe something else going on that's physical. Depression and anxiety that weren't there before. So any kinds of changes in those sort of mood or affect, we want to look at those signs. And then if they're having trouble getting around, if they're having trouble with their mobility, with their walking, or moving around, then that's a sign that there's something that they may need help with. And of course, obviously, if they're falling, having accidents like that, that's going to be a big red flag. So those are some of the biggest signs that an aging parent might need some help. Now, there's other areas of consideration too, to look at with an aging parent. So activities of daily living, that's what ADL is. And then IADL, of course, is instrumental activity of daily living. And the difference is, in ADL is that everyday activity doing things to care for oneself, like being able to brush your own teeth, being able to brush your hair, being able to use the bathroom, feed oneself, etc. Those kinds of care kinds of things. And IADL is the bigger picture of taking care of oneself, like being able to manage their own finances, or keep their house clean, or do those other sorts of pieces that are important to being able to live independently. And then, of course, safety is always an area of concern. That's one of the first things we look at whenever we see somebody who's older and want to make sure that they're safe. And if there's safety concerns, then we want to look at what needs to happen to make that person safe. Obviously, medical and health areas to consider. Are there health changes or medical events, things like that? And then, of course, legal and financial planning kinds of things and practices. Is a person still able to manage their own um, uh, legal and financial issues, or do they need some assistance, or have they got a plan in place? There's lots of things there to consider. And then housing, is their housing situation working for them, or is this not a safe place anymore? Do they need more supports? Are they still able to live at home, or do we need to consider working with them on the possibility of a more of a long-term care type environment? And then quality of life. That is such an important one that we often don't think about, but is just as important as safety and all the others. So making sure that our older adult parent is still able to live their best life and have a good quality of life. If that seems to be suffering, then we need to look at what do we need to do to make that better. And then relationships and family dynamics in terms of change primarily. Is there a change in the relationship with other family members, friends, neighbors, and things that might be of concern? Are things taking a downward tone? And now I'm not talking about just because a person maybe had a fight with a family member, but in long-term kind of relationships, is there a change in the dynamic that's concerning? So those are some areas to consider. Now, here's some general tips. If you're having to talk to your aging parent about things that you have concerns about their care, needs for care, and their ability to take care of themselves, these are some of the general tips that you want to consider. So first of all, be patient. Always be patient. And sometimes that's hard when it's your own parent because there's lots of buttons that get pushed. But being patient and being persistent. Don't be afraid to bring up a topic over and over, but do it in a patient, loving way that's not pushy, not nagging, but you may have to bring up a topic a few times before the person is ready to hear you. Avoid power struggles. So make sure you're picking your battles. If there's things that you think should be different, but it really isn't hurting, it's not a safety risk or anything like that, let it go. You need to let go of those things. You need to focus on the things that are most important to keep that person safe. Okay? Because you are not now their parent. You are just a concerned child who is helping that person. Okay, helping their parent, but you haven't become the parent. Now, there are situations, of course, when somebody has dementia and such that it's going to, the dynamic's going to change a bit and you're going to wind up more in a parenting role. But I'm talking about in general. Okay, so we're not making an assumption that just because a person needs help, they have dementia. It's very, very rare that that's actually the case. Be sensitive. Make sure that you're being sensitive to their needs and their issues and their feelings because it's scary getting older. Nobody likes it. We don't know. I don't remember the last time I had somebody who was just thrilled to tell me how old they were. Some people are proud of their age and they should be. Everyone should be. But the process of aging is often very uncomfortable for us. Watch your timing. Make sure you're not bringing things up at the wrong time. Find a time when the person is ready to hear you, ready to receive some input and have a dialogue with you. If you choose to do it at a time when the person is upset or has other things on their mind that they're expressing, that's not the time to bring up, well, I don't think your living situation is working anymore, Mom. That's not good. So pick your timing. Stay calm, always stay calm. If you get riled, if you get frustrated, if you show impatience or anger or anything, you're going to shut that person down. And that's the last thing you want to do when you're trying to help your parent. Seek outside help. Don't assume you have all the answers. Get help from organizations that are appropriate for the need that you see where their issue is. Get help from friends. Get help from neighbors. Sometimes people are able to hear others outside of their family. I've always said you can't be a prophet in your own land. So telling your own parent the things you see, you're still their child and they're not going to hear it well from you maybe, but they might hear it from that outside expert or friend who's concerned. So enlist them. Spend more time with your family member. If you're not spending a lot of time with them, don't assume that you know all the pieces. Some things may look like danger signs that really aren't, and other times they are. So spend more time with that individual, that parent, so that you know, have a better sense of what's really going on and what really they need help with and support. Ask questions. Don't tell people they should do things. Ask questions. Help them problem solve. Look for those solutions together. If you have a concern about something, use I statements and say, "Mom, I'm concerned about um, the light at night around here and your ability to see without the lights on, or whatever it is. So how can we change that, make it easier for you, Mom?" So use that, talk to them that way. And for some of you, that might be hard because that might not be the way your communication with your family members have been. So you may have to be changing a little, and that may send up a few red flags with your parents, like why are they acting this way now? But people will adapt to niceness. Definitely try to uh, choose that ploy of working together on things. And then focus on the benefits of the help that you're offering or suggesting. Because if you focus on that rather than, don't say you need this, you need to do that, but focus on those benefits of, um, why it might be good to look at an assisted living home, or in a community care situation or something like that, by talking about this, how you can have the opportunity to make new friends or do more fun things, and takes the pressure off you and responsibilities for certain things, or whatever it might be. You might want to bring in additional family members. Again, that depends on you and your family dynamics. But if things are going well between you and other family members, or the other family members and that parent, even if not you and your sibling, bring them in, because working as a team often will do better. Um, Use that support of friends again, and then talk to the healthcare provider. Now, if the person hasn't signed a HIPAA waiver, they may not be able to give you information, but you can always talk to them. Most healthcare providers will take your input into consideration. Discuss the broader safety concerns of things that you see as problems with your loved one. So, for example, Dad, I know you don't want to give up driving, and it's very important to you, and you want to stay as independent as possible, and I want that for you too. But I'm concerned because sometimes you seem to miss the stop signs, and I'm worried about what if something happens, if you hit somebody or cause an accident and harm to somebody else. So appeal to that piece too. Remember their rights as adults. Your parents are adults, and they have the right, unless they have a cognitive issue that, there's legal pieces to that, but unless they have dementia, they have a right to say no. They absolutely do. And there's, you have to accept that. So treat people like adults. If you work with them instead of telling them what to do and being directive, you're gonna have better chances of being able to support them properly. And put yourself in their shoes. You'll get a lot more insight if a person is feeling threatened or scared. They're going to be more hostile, they're going to be more angry, they're going to be more resistive, and so on. So you want to make sure that you're being as friendly as possible, but you also need to gain that empathy. So I know when we talk about dementia, we do the virtual dementia tour in order to decrease empathy. But if a person doesn't have dementia, there's still ways, just physically think about it. Put yourself in their shoes and think about what it's like for them. And there's other simulations out there to do with aging as well. And so if you're interested in any of that, you'll have my contact information at the end. I can hook you up with some of those different resources as well. And then accept what you can't change. Again, they are adults with choices. So you need to let go of things that you can't change. Just because you think something should be doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. So unless it's something that's an absolute danger, then you may have to let it go. Now, let's switch gears again and talk a little bit about caring. So if you're taking care of a loved one, or you're about to take care, there's some positive things about providing care, and there's some negative things. So some of the positives are a sense of purpose and meaning. Some of us have more purpose and meaning in our lives that we know what to do with, but it's important that we focus on those things. When we're wanting to help our parent, we need to think about why we want to do that and get some fulfillment from that. And so personal fulfillment is important. And for some people, there's a renewal of their spiritual or religious faith when they provide care to an aging parent. So that might be a bonus as well. And then for a lot of people, it brings people closer together. You may get closer to your parent than you have been in a long time or even ever. So that can be a positive benefit as well. And then there's some difficult things, certainly some challenges. There can be a lot of emotional distress, a lot of worry. There can be depression and anxiety if you're having to do a lot of care. And the person is resistive, or there's a lot of difficult things, or just, there may be a disease process that is just really rough. It can lead to fatigue and poor physical health if you're not taking good care of yourself. Social isolation, if you're really entrenched in that care role. And that's when you want to consider at what point do you need to share those care responsibilities with others or with another organization or senior living community. And then if there's family conflict, of course, we know that can be really difficult. One of the favorite things that I often talk about that happens to that primary care partner, which might be you, is around the holidays or sometime when relatives come to visit. So we call some of those folks are what we call seagull relatives. So because they fly in like a seagull, they squawk around telling you, oh, you're not doing this right, oh, mom's not that bad, whatever, and leaving their droppings of challenges and uproar, and then they fly out again, and then you're left there going, what just happened? And oh my gosh, it's going to take a month to recover and get back on track with my parent because of this. So there are those relatives, and so managing that can be an extra stress and burden. Now, there's a whole lot of things on this slide about burnout. I'm not going to go over every one of them for the sake of time, but burnout happens in a lot of ways. Hopefully you have not experienced this and you can take measures to make sure this doesn't happen. But if you have, here are some of those signs to watch out for. So of course, if your sleep is disrupted on a regular basis and your eating patterns, if you're not taking good care of yourself, whether it involves food or medications or things like that, if you're getting irritable, if you're finding your mental and emotional state are much more raw, or you have some of these issues, you have lost your patience, and overreact to things, if you start to feel resentful, if you feel like you're alienated, if you feel like you just wish that person would just be done, like not saying I'm wishing you that you would wish a death of your loved one, but that you want it over. Those are big red flags that there's burnout. And there's a lot of things that can be done to help that. So we don't want anyone to get to that point. But if you're already at that point, please reach out to someone and get some help, because there are things that can be done to support you and make things a bit better. So some of those key challenges for us in caring are an ever increasing commitment of time. And that can be even if you're doing a remote care role, just helping to manage your parents' finances or care situation or whatever. So it will take an increased amount of time, but if it gets to be a really big commitment, then you have to look at other options to help you. There may be psychological losses, there may be physical issues, physical effort that needs to be put out, there may be financial costs of care to be considered, and some of the other challenges are role changes. Again, that parent-child dynamic may change, particularly with dementia. Hopefully not too much if it's not dementia. But there can be strains on those roles, and that's hard, and competing demands. If you've got children and an aging parent that you're having to help care for, that can be very difficult. So those kinds of challenges are not uncommon. There is good news coming, I promise you. So family members and care recipients, there's some things like that happen with other family members that can be less than helpful, or with the person that your parent. There may be controlling behaviors. There may be sabotage of care, either by the person the parent receiving care, or by another family member who is sort of setting you up to fail. There could be unreasonable demands, there could be bullying or manipulation, there could be um, poor or no communication, there could be denial, lots of things that can be issues. So again, if you're experiencing these things, this is a good time to get outside help, whether it's someone the parent knows and trusts, or an outside organization, whatever is appropriate for that situation. And then respite, if you're in the throes of caring, then respite is an important thing to consider. Taking some time out for you, because that's so very important, especially if it's a person with dementia. That tends to be really a full-time job plus, but even without that, there could be lots of different conditions where you're having to spend a lot of time. And it could be respite, again, could be a long distance care role, or not a direct care role, but with all the other responsibilities in your life, everybody needs a vacation, everybody needs a break. And so, it's a cliche these days, but it is still very true. Put that oxygen mask on yourself before you help the other people. And again, that respite piece, appraise your situation if it's getting difficult. Look at your own coping styles, look for your own social support, and look at what kind of financial and environmental supports you have. And are you using all of them, or are there things that you could be using, or other things that you need that you can identify so that you can go after those things? Managing your difficult family members, again, patience, 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 patience. Wear that armor of patience. Listen to them. I know this is a little redundant, but it bears worth repeating. Separate the person from the behavior. If the behavior is different than it used to be, if your parent is becoming more angry or hostile or irritable or whatever, don't take it personally. Usually it's again, fear, loss, a lot of concerns there, or could be the illness that's driving that behavior. So look more at it through the lens of a scientist and try to analyze what's going on with that, what's behind that behavior. Work at keeping your voice low. Low and slow is always important. That helps keep you calm. It helps keep the situation calm. Try not to overthink things. Big thing for a lot of people is to overthink things. It's really easy to do, especially when it's our parent, especially when it's our own parent, because there's so many different considerations beyond the current, whatever the issue is that's causing the concern, but also a lifetime of family dynamics and issues and role changes and so on and so forth. There's a million things that impact us. So we want to try to really be careful about overthinking things. Also recognize that that parent may be feeling guilty. They may be afraid of or think that they're being helpful. You've got to look at it from their perspective. So they may have issues there as well. Or that family member may feel guilty because they're not giving enough. So instead, they try to tell you how you should take care of that person. My own little brother, I remember, was incensed with me because I would not fly my grandmother with dementia across the country to my wedding, even though she clearly had dementia and she couldn't do anything by herself, and he could not understand that. So that was a real dynamic issue that we had for a number of years. And in the end, talking to him years later, discovered the guilt he was feeling because he wasn't able to contribute to her care or do anything to be of assistance. And remember, in the end, that your family members, good or bad, they're your family. And they can be helpful, they can be a hindrance sometimes, but they are your family. And so everybody's got feelings and dynamics. So sometimes you have to not only put yourself in the shoes of your aging parent, but also a sibling or a spouse as well, which is a lot to ask of anyone. But sometimes we need to do that for our own selves, as well as to do our best job of helping our parent. So then time management, of course, is another piece of that. I'm not going to get into all of the shoulds with that. I was taught at an early age, thou shalt not should on people. So no shoulding. But helping to have a schedule may be very helpful for your own coping ability. And for some of us, that comes easier than others. But also at the same time, have those schedules, but be flexible, because life is what happens when you're busy making plans, and you're going to need to be flexible for your own sanity, for the person you are helping to support. And then find the humor whenever you can. That will help a lot in coping. So humor does a number of things. For one, it helps you to stay calm. It helps you to cope better. It helps you enhance your own memory. It helps you physiologically. It helps you in so many different ways. So use humor. Now, one caveat to that is humor does not include sarcasm. That's bullying. Sarcasm is not humor, but genuine humor can be very, very useful. Okay, so I'm trying to rush through a lot of this. Just a few more things for you. So a few tips. Um, uh, Whether you're in active care planning, or if you're just thinking about it, or whatever, if you're in the throes of caring for someone, plan ahead whenever possible. Take it one day at a time. I know these things sound like cliches, but they're so very true. Accept help when it is offered. That is a hard thing for a lot of us to do, is to accept help, but we need to do that because none of us, some of us should wear capes because we are super, but none of us are true super humans, and we do need to accept help when it's offered. Make sure you're taking care of yourself, getting rest, eating properly, being good to yourself. Have contingency plans whenever possible, because you might get sick, something might happen to you, so you need that backup plan for your parent. Make sure, again, taking time for yourself. Share your feelings with somebody. Have someone you can confide in, perhaps a support group. Learn about your local resources and your national level resources, any resources that are available to you. If you're on this webinar now, you're already working on that stuff. So yay, that's good. Don't take those behaviors personally. They're usually a signal of something else. And understand that even if you do everything right, sometimes there will be issues that you just can't control. Sometimes things will go wrong, and it isn't always your fault. It really isn't. So we do the best we can. We leave the rest. Okay. Support groups, again, I'm not going to go into this. There's a lot of different types of support out there now, especially now that we have advanced capabilities with, things like these webinars and Zoom meetings and so on and so forth. So lots of different ways to interact with people and get help, get someone who you can talk to, just a vent, or somebody you can strategize with, whether it's friends, family, an organization that has support groups, telephone calls, whatever. Lots of different options, but find some support. If you feel isolated and alone, there are lots of resources out there. So tap into that. And then living options. So there's lots of different living options out there. So a person may just need some help at home. Maybe they just need some home help. Maybe they need some home help, maintenance at home, to maintain doing some basic chores, and maybe a sitter service at times, somebody to be there with them at night or something like that. Sometimes people will work well, living in a personal care home. It's a home with several other older adults that might need a lot of care or might need a little amount of care. So there's different types of personal care homes across the country. Then, of course, there's assisted living. And of course, Arbor Company is one of those great chains of assisted living properties. Nursing homes as well. If a person has more advanced needs, that can be a long-term care living situation. It could be what we call skilled nursing, which is temporary, like rehab, where a person goes back home, or there could be palliative or hospice care there. There can also be palliative and hospice care at the end of life in any of these different environments. And then there's what we call continuing care retirement communities, where a person might start out in independent living, move to a more assisted living, maybe a memory care if needed, and gradually into more and more skilled care. And so I know Arbor is one of the companies that has a lot of those kinds of properties where you can have that what we call graduated care, where a person can start at one level and only get as much care as they need, so they can maintain as much independence as possible, because that's what we all really want, is to stay as independent as possible and be able to live our best lives. So here's just a few care resources. Now, these are just basic care partner kinds of sites. From that, you can tree out into a lot of other things. These organizations have a lot of resources listed on them, lots of information about caring and all the different considerations, a lot of which I've covered today. A lot of links to legal and financial planning, to how to figure out what's the best in terms of senior living arrangements if need be, and various other kinds of issues that you might have, as well as taking care of yourself and coping with an aging parent. So I know this was kind of a whirlwind, but I want to give time for some questions. So this is my contact information. And again, I will make my slides available to Arbor Company to share, or if you want to contact me directly, if you have questions that I don't answer today, you'd like more information about what we do at Second Wind Dreams, dementia, any of these kinds of things, I'm always available, and I'm more than happy to talk to you as well. So I'm gonna leave that up and stop talking so we can talk about some questions.
Awesome job. Great tips. We have so many questions that we want to get to. I think the first one, you just answered it. We have Harvey Elfman wanted to know, can I get a copy of the general tips section? So Melora, when you say that you'll pass along some of the information, will that be a part of the information you pass along?
Absolutely. I will just make a PDF of all the slide deck and send it on, then you can share it with your audience. Absolutely.
Thank you. And just so that everybody knows, if you're viewing this webinar right now, you signed up to RSVP. This webinar will be available in a link in the email you used to RSVP starting tomorrow. So you can rewatch this. If it's easier just to flip through the PDF, that will also be attached as well to that same email. So it will be one nice email with a big ribbon on it with everything that you need from this webinar, with the fantastic information that Melora shared with us here today. So I hope that that helps all of you. Also, really good time to get your questions in. We've got quite a few in already. If you don't know how to do that, scroll down to the bottom of the screen, see that little Q&A button, type your questions out there, and we will get those in before the top of the hour. All right, let's go to the top, and we've got Leanna, and this is a great question. Hello, everyone. Just moved my mom this week into memory care. This is very hard for me as she has called me a few times, crying and confused and scared. I'm not sleeping and am heartbroken. Any advice on how to cope?
Oh my gosh, yeah, that is one of the roughest times. The first thing I would say is that that initial transition, that first few weeks is the toughest. It will ease up. It will ease up. I promise you. It may not feel like it right now, but it will get better over time. Um, it may be there's several things that you can do. First of all, make sure the staff, if they don't already know, that they're aware of it. There are different techniques that different folks use, some of which is to have recordings on their phones, so that, perhaps a voicemail, so that if you need your rest, it's a comforting, reassuring voicemail when she calls that she's going to hear that says, "It's okay, mom. We'll see you soon and everything's going to be okay," whatever the language needs to be for you. Um, uh, Also, there are some times when they need to put a limit on the times that the phone is available for use, and maybe it means that the cord needs to be taken away. I hate to say that, but there are extreme cases when that might need to happen. I would not say all the time, but maybe at night. But also making sure that the staff have someone available to sort of be with that person. And often places will employ volunteers as well. So exploring what those kind of options might be with that staff. I think that's the most critical piece, though, making sure not only they're aware of it, but seeing what resources they have to help you with that as well. That's the short answer. There certainly are more tips, but I could spend all day just talking about that, and I don't want to take up all the time. But if you want a little deeper dive on that, you're certainly welcome to email me, and I can connect you with some tip sheets and things about how to handle that very situation, because it is very painful, but it will ease over time.
And I think that that also leads to, sort of all encompassing just guilt in general. And I think we touched on it a couple of times in this webinar, with our aging parent and maybe not being able to provide them everything that we'd like to provide them. What can we do for ourselves, even if it's just a simple tip or something that you can think of that you find tends to work for the majority, on that end when we talk about guilt, Melora?
I think the biggest thing that I would say is to forgive yourself for everything you've ever done wrong with your parent before, whether it's related to care now or not, to find um, and to come to an understanding that you were not born a caregiver. You were not, it's not a natural part of life to know these things, and you're going to make mistakes, and it's okay. I often paraphrase Maya Angelou, who said in a poem that we don't know what we don't know, but once we know better, we can do better. So let go and start from this moment forward with what you do know and do your best, but let go of the things that you may have screwed up on. You may have felt bad because you couldn't fix it for that person, because you're ultimately not a superhuman. Um, and there's just only so much you can do. So forgiveness, I think, is the first step in any time you're feeling guilty. And then actively trying to figure out what is it that you can do, what's tangible that you are able to do, and what are you willing to commit to, and be okay with getting help from others with those other pieces and letting go of what you can. So I know that sounds kind of ethereal, but really I think that's the big first step.
Yeah, and I think it's actually a first step that may actually help quite a few people, maybe those watching today or those who are watching the video on the back end. So thank you so much for that. Another question from Anonymous: are people truly living better with the rise of obesity and hypertension and mental health issues? That's so a lot on that roster there.
Yeah, so yeah, I know I said that in the beginning, but I think overall, yes, I do think that a lot of people are living longer and better. Certainly, there is a lot of people who are not. Was not a sweeping, everybody's doing better. Some people are living a lot longer and not well at all, not managing chronic conditions and having other issues. So, yeah, so I can't say, I hope I didn't mean to portray that everybody's living longer and better, but we have more opportunities, certainly. And a lot of people are living a lot healthier and having a better quality of life than ever before. So yeah, it depends on the individual, really.
Sure,
Ultimately.
sure. Yeah, I hope that that answers that question. Joanne has a question, and maybe we can help her here today. Hello, friend. I have several caregivers and support groups who have moms with early dementia living alone who are refusing slash firing caregivers and accusing family of trying to put her away, etc. The loving mother is now saying that she hates the daughter and behaving with increased hostility. It seems apparent that assisted living is needed as family lives out of town. Any suggestions on how to manage care and a move to assisted living? Thanks, Melora. Joanne.
Yeah, that's a big question, really, but it's a very common issue that happens quite a bit. Yeah. So I think, again, some of the things that I mentioned earlier about trying to put themselves in the shoes of that parent and that mother, perhaps, and looking at why they are doing that. There's going to be paranoia with a lot of the beginning stages of dementias. And so some of that is one of the biggest challenges. So looking at what's behind that behavior, what's that fear behind it, and certainly not taking personally when the person says they hate their daughter. So helping that daughter or son, whoever it is, understand that that's the disease behaving badly, not that person. As far as looking at senior living options, I think that yeah, doing that research at a local level, you can look at places like your local area agency on aging, information and referral services for different pieces of support. Certainly your support group is going to help with that. And then I think if you can recommend, while you may not be in a position to recommend a specific company, if you can gather a list of those resources, most senior living companies will be happy to share some tips and tricks for ways to introduce this idea to them. That is just one of the most difficult pieces, but sometimes, and the other piece to that is also talking with the healthcare providers and looking at the legal and financial pieces, perhaps with an elder law attorney, and what is that person capable of making a decision about what do you need to intervene with. And it can be very painful in the short run, but at it may also, in the long run, be the best thing to keep, not only keep that person safe, but eventually, usually people will, that piece will subside and it will get easier, especially once they're in a good care situation.
Sure. And someone, as you were giving that answer there, sort of added in on the back end that we had to result to the ER and transition to behavioral health, then
Mhm.
memory care to move my mom. She was very difficult. It was that or conservatorship. Mom has Alzheimer's. So it's, again, the spectrum, right? It's varying degrees of the spectrum. And I know, Joanne, you mentioned assisted living. And I guess it was kind of touched upon there in that answer by Melora. Maybe it's instead of looking at assisted living, maybe more memory care. And as Melora said, you can go to those particular communities, give them a call, maybe get those tips and tricks. But that is what they are there for. These are people who are very knowledgeable and those who are dealing with dementia and all the different kinds of dementia that one can have. And they deal with it every day.
Yeah.
So I hope that that answers your question. And thank you, Anonymous, for that, for helping us to understand your situation at the end as well. Susan has a question. How does one decide which hospice company to choose? And is kindness and compassion unreasonable expectations?
Well, yes, kindness and compassion should always be reasonable expectations, should be a requirement, no matter what kind of service, whether it's home health, hospice, assisted living, memory care, you name it, whatever it is, there should always be compassion and kindness. If it there, that's your first red flag. If there isn't, then you walk away. That's, you take them off the list. Um, but as far as how to look for one, again, look to your local resources. Of course, there's going to be several that'll advertise in local sort of publications, things like Seniors Blue Books, different things online. You can go to use different websites like A Place for Mom and so on and so forth. Or your area agency on aging typically will have information referral lists of those places. Another thing I would do is I would look at reviews. We're in an age of internet reviews. So look, if you're looking at got a short list of different perhaps hospices, for example, look at the reviews out there. Now, understand that every single place that provides care in any kind is going to have one or two people who had a horrible experience or who just want to vent, who just will never be happy with anybody. So take that with a grain of salt. But if the majority of reviews are very good and not just surface reviews, ones that have a little bit more detail, to give you a sense, do that due diligence and don't be afraid to go in and visit these places and see what the dynamic feels like to you, and then you'll find a comfortable one there too. So those are some different avenues I would use if it was my mother or father.
Yeah, and they should be welcome to you wanting to stop in and take a look
Yeah,
and what
absolutely.
have you, and asking questions. And if they're not, as Melora said, if there is no kindness or compassion, that too is also a red flag. So thank you, Susan, for that question, and I hope that that answers your question. And then as we start to wind down and get closer to the top of the hour, Tamika has a great question, and I think this is a good one to perhaps end the webinar on. And you probably get this all the time, Melora. It's about finances. And Tamika asks, what is the biggest barrier of financial costs associated with the program? And what are the common resources used for a family who doesn't qualify for Medicaid? What are some alternatives to make it affordable?
Yeah. Oh, that is one of the most common questions, definitely, and one of the most difficult. Of course, there are places that are private pay only. There's places that take Medicaid. There's places that have sliding scales, that are sort of in between. Other pay sources, of course, Medicare may pay for some services, doesn't tend to pay well for long-term care, but does pay for some of those pieces. Um, this is where I encourage, and this is kind of not helpful for you particularly, but for those of you who may be looking at this down the road, or for yourself for the future, look at long-term care insurance, because that is a big help down the road. It's something we think we don't need and can live without often, don't want to put the money into, but that's something that, for yourselves at least, consider for the future, for your own care if you need it. But I know that doesn't help your immediate situation. There are some other funding options options out there. Again, I know I keep going back to the area agents on aging, but they tend to have the good information resource database, and they will often know about different supplementary programs. Sometimes there's grants and things like that as well. If there is a place that you are particularly interested, you want to have your loved one at, talk to them because they may have an option for some for lower income options. But there's lots of different organizations out there that do the same things. So some of them may be nonprofit and able to do it on more of what they call that sliding scale, to be able to give good care, even if the person doesn't have a lot of resources initially. So that's what I would say is a short answer. That's another one I could talk about all day about, but that's what I would do in the short run. Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks for that question, Tamika. I know that that's probably on the top of a lot of people's minds. So you just answered a question that a lot of people probably had coming into this or who are watching this on the back end. A couple more things that came in here at the bottom. Sally asks, can we have a copy of the slides? Of course, Sally, this will be a part of the email sent to you tomorrow with a link to this webinar. And Melora has been kind enough to offer up her slides as well, and it will most likely be sent as a PDF, correct, Melora?
Yes. Yeah.
Got
Absolutely.
it. And then somebody added at the end, look for a place offering the guide model for dementia. Are you familiar with that, Melora?
Yeah. That's one good model. There's a lot of good different approaches to care, actually. So I try not to pick one that I would say is the best, but that is one of the best. So yeah, that's one. Or there's several other approaches to care that are real good as well. What you want to look for is a place that uses language like empathic, person-centered dementia care. So look for those kind of keywords whenever you're looking at an organization, because they're going to be using approaches like that, whether it's the guide, whether it's GEMS, Montessori, habilitation, best friends approach, Eden alternative, greenhouse. I can go on and on all day, but the guide is definitely one of the best ones out there. So that's a good one to look for, definitely.
And what were those words again? Empathic?
Person-centered care, person-centered dementia care, those kinds of terms. If you hear those in the language being used in their materials and things like that up front, then they're more likely to be using one of these approaches to care. Yeah.
Got it. And you did mention the GEM model, and that is what the Arbor Company utilizes. So thanks for mentioning that as well. And I love it when our audience can come and chime in and offer a little bit of help to those who are also viewing as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for the questions, and for those of you who are trying to help our other viewers as well. Man, this was a jam-packed hour full of information, great tips today. I would call it the perfect webinar with examples of what our viewers may be experiencing, and then suggestions very quickly and answers to each of those situations. Melora, thank you so much for being with us today. Please come back.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. I'd love to.
Well, for those of you watching who found this webinar insightful, informative, we've got a lot more videos just like this one on our website. Head on over to www.seniorlivinglive.com. There we have videos covering all aspects of senior living. They are all on demand and they are all free. Thank you so much for watching today and for being a part of our conversation. Have a great day, everybody.